This is Sunday morning, something like May 26, 2024. We spent the night here at Canoe Canada after a much delayed flight getting into Minneapolis, but finally got here. And this trip, we're going to explore part of the northeast corner of White Otter Canoe Area, somewhere in this vicinity. This is the day God has given us. Oh my goodness. We couldn't have a much nicer day. It's high 40s. No wind yet. I don't think wind is going to be an issue from the forecast. So it's probably about 6:30, 6:40. We're supposed to meet someone to go over final details around 7, and then start heading up. The idea is to head up some of these logging trails, kind of between like Dashwa Lake and Finlayson, to get up north a little bit, save some paddling days instead of starting at Dashwa, and then head up to Sparkle and Adele and these places where I've not ever seen anyone canoe in. So Jim Clark actually left us a map with some portage ideas, but of course it's been probably 40 years for him since he's been in that area. So we'll see if that's accurate or not. Mostly it's going to be getting up there and figuring out where portages ought to be, and maybe some bushwhacking. But I've got help with me this time, so that should be fun. So we've just pulled off the logging road. It's about 9:30, and there's the trail down to the lake we're starting on. Nice little waterfall I can hear over to the right side. So we'll get on the lake and start heading that away. Just paddle through the first little channel. One little beaver dam to pull over. Now continuing north. So this is coming up to our first real portage. We anticipate it's right here since there's boats parked right side by side. This is an encouraging sign. This portage is actually very well cleared. I wouldn't say well traveled, but at least cleared out, except for being mid-shin deep in water. We just had rain apparently all last week, so the water levels are up. It's a pretty nice little portage. Not very long. So we just carried the bags across the first time. Come back for the canoe this time. Bow Lake Outpost Cabin. Taking a little lunch break. We're on the north side of Bow Lake. Found this little cliff top site. At least had some sort of clearing that we could get into. Most of the topography here is not really amenable to pulling into shore. Huge cliffs and trees really coming right down to the water. But this is what we could find. I think we're finishing Bow Lake about now. There should be a little channel through here to get to the next lake. One concern on this trip is the complete absence of anything that looks suitable for camping. We've had steep cliffs on one side and forest coming right down to the water on the other. I haven't really seen anything that I'd want to put up a tent, but we'll see. We're about maybe 12 miles into today. Do another 4 or 5 maybe before actually looking for a campsite. So this should be kind of like the second actual portage of the day. And a lot of paddling with very little portaging. We're at the north end of this little lake, and that way leads to Sparkle Lake. I needed to see Sparkle one time before it was too late. This portage was marked from the road by this ancient gas can, or from the lake. And then actually some yellow flagging tape on one of these bushes. That made it easy to find. Of course, you just look for the rapids, and that made it even easier. So, we'll see where this one goes. It's not very long, but I'm gonna have to walk through the creek. It's not bad at all. Lovely campsite for day one. It's the first relatively flat place that I've seen in 17 miles of travel, so we're going to take it. There is a little more or less flat place up there that we can put a tent and enough space to sit and have some dinner. We scared off a big goose as we pulled in here and found 5 huge goose eggs in a nest. We're not going to touch them. They're probably getting ready to hatch. Alright, so it's about 5 o'clock. It's been a long day of travel. We're going to set up camp and then maybe go out and do some fishing. Well, that's our first decent fish of the trip. It was about 4 casts in. So that'll be bass dinner for half of us at least. Should be about ready. So this morning we head north again through a couple of narrow passageways. Finally get into Sparkle Lake. And then we're going to do a big loop around, heading over towards, I think it's Gulliver and Doan Lake. And that'll probably be the day. And after that, next day, probably hit the north part of Sanford Lake. And then a couple days to travel south and finish the trip. Do our heavy travel days the first couple of days, and then probably 30% less the last few days. Definitely beautiful days to travel. So it's Monday morning. We're heading north towards Sparkle that way. Couldn't ask for a nicer day. Just a wisp of wind. Now just enough to keep any bugs away. Bugs haven't been too bad yet. Mosquitoes are just now coming out apparently. And haven't been bothered by the black flies at all yet. So our first moose of the trip about 5 minutes ago. but it was in the woods and couldn't really get a picture of it, but she looked at us for a while and then went off into the woods.
Putting up a fight though.
Yeah.
What is that?
I can't tell from, that's a, hold on, grab by the leader.
By the leader?
Yeah, pull it in. That's a pickerel, bring it in.
Pickerel?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, bro. Come on. Nice fish.
Yeah. In the distance there, which you won't be able to see most likely, is our second moose of the day. Just crossed that little sliver of water. Makes me rethink about having a camera with a zoom. A little bit of rapids. It was too hard to paddle up, so we jumped out and lined up a little bit. I think when we get around that corner, probably right here, we can get in a paddle, head up that way. So we're halfway through the portage into Sparkle Lake. There's where we came from. Sparkle Lake's over here, and we're crossing one of these roads that I saw on Google Maps, which I guess is the Sparkle Lake Road. You can just barely see through the trees there, the lake. And they've got all these signposts put up to show people, I guess. Or maybe those are something to hang your carcasses on. I don't know. Used to be a bird box there. And over on this side, we've got a pile of wood and an outhouse. This is probably a hunting camp. That's my story. Some rope way up in the tree, I guess, for hanging food. But anyway, we found the portage up the road a little bit, again, with flagging tape on the side, so someone's taking care of us here. One of the goals for this trip was to get into lakes with awesome names. That why wouldn't you want to come to Sparkle Lake? So this is the start of it. Mosquitoes are a little bit hungry, but they're I think very juvenile. Most of them haven't figured out how to bite. They're just more of a nuisance. They fly in your ears and that sort of thing. We just finished the first portage into Boulder Lake. That way. And this portage is more or less what I anticipated a lot of this trip would be like. Just walk up the trail a little bit. There's this tree that's over the side. Another tree to crawl under. And then, actually, I found a little side trail to go around that tree. But over here you can see a big blowdown. Let me head back to where the trail is supposed to be. I say supposed to because you can see a trail here, and then it ends in this massive, massive pine tree falling over right across the trail. First time over, I took the downside. I'm going to see what the upside of this tree looks like, and maybe easier. There's that tree. And then you've got other trees that have done the same thing. Just a big old blowdown here. So we need to go that way. Easier said than done. This trail has some flagging tape every now and then, but you'll go for 5 minutes without seeing any. There's one of the little flags, but it's kind of worn away. Anyway, I'm gonna make my way back for the canoe, and then I think it's time to find a place to camp. This is real fun living. This is what we paid money for. And the black flies are just an extra bonus. So we just finished that brutal portage, and JJ still has energy. I don't. I told him we're like 1.5 lakes before where I expected to stop today. But I said the first campsite we can find, and literally on this trip there haven't been any campsites. So I looked on the map and I saw this peninsula on the map and I said, let's check that out. And this is right across from the portage, that way. And here's this fantastic campsite. It's got a great flat area for the tent. It's got a little kitchen on the, I guess, the north side. So we are parking here for the night. I think we did a little over 13 miles today. Not the 15 I anticipated, but the last 3 days are shorter days anyway, so we can make it up, hopefully. Also, the wind's picking up, clouds are coming in. I don't know if we're going to have any weather tonight or not, but I don't want to waste any more of my little energy left fighting the wind and hoping to find a campsite somewhere. So this is where it's going to be. So this is Tuesday morning, May 28th. Getting ready to leave Boulder Lake. Well, just got into Boulder Lake. Getting ready to paddle down Boulder Lake south. Got the campsite all picked up. Canoe mostly loaded. The clouds came in overnight. No more stargazing. And it's colder than normal morning, so I've got extra layer on. Definitely super cloudy sky. Got the rain gear handy. And pretty decent wind coming in. You can't really see it on the water, but you can feel it and you can hear it. So we're heading south, portage, paddle, portage, paddle, portage. I think 5 portages today if we get where we want to go. And ideally we get to Sanford Lake today. It's about 15 miles. Single portaging, longer for double portaging, which we are. So we'll see. If we're on Irene Lake, I'll be just as happy. I want to give JJ a chance to visit Tip Top Lodge if possible on Sanford Lake, because that's pretty cool to see an abandoned lodge. So we finished the second of the first 2 portages this morning from Boulder Lake towards Gamble Lake. We got one more short one to go before we hit Gamble. And most of this portage, I was saying, man, we're back into civilized portages. A decent trail. But then there's 2 big trees right across the portage that we had to crawl under or crawl over. Made it a little more difficult. There's the second of those trees. It's fairly fresh, everything's still green on there. There's the other one. No climbing over that one. Had to crawl under. So we just finished the portage into Doan Lake from Gamble. a moderately long portage, ankle deep to mid-shin deep in water a lot of the way. But other than that, it was pretty good until there was multiple down trees. Some we had to drag the canoe across, some we could just walk across. But it's taken a while to get here for sure. I was way too optimistic thinking we'd get here day 2. I'm sure I mentioned that this portage into Doan from Gamble was wet. So a lot of it's like this. That's only ankle deep. Okay, above ankle deep. Okay, mid-shin. I'm wishing we had the canoe to paddle through. Yeah, almost up to the knees. Oh, yes. So the plan was, after crossing Irene, to just go across to the Irene portage, head south and loop around. This is, I'm pretty sure, where the Tip Top Lodge is. And kind of wanted JJ to see that because it's pretty fascinating. But then he mentioned and said, well, instead of doing that, why don't we just do this? So that's what we're trying to do. We're going up a little stream now, right here, still paddling. And it looks like we can come down here and portage into
Now we're going down the stream.
portage into Hooligan Lake, which is what he wants to see as well. So we found some sort of little portage into Little Mabel Lake. It's short but tight, so having to carry the canoe with 2 hands. Ready to go? This is pretty clearly not any sort of maintained portage. I don't see any saw cuts anywhere. Might just be some sort of game trail, but at least gets us into Little Mabel Lake. So we got to Little Mabel Lake, paddled all the way down to where we anticipated there should be a portage. Found a trail, actually. I scouted it about a quarter of the way. It's about 500 yards between here and a little lake that goes into Houlihan, then into Sanford. So I went maybe 100 yards down the trail. It was rugged, but it was a clear-cut trail. So I called JJ, let's do it. So we put the packs on, and about 150 yards in, the trail just disappeared. And then we were kind of bushwhacking. We knew where to go, but it was pretty dense forest. And we were just walking with our packs, and we could get through, but then how were we going to get the canoe through without actually hacking a portage trail? So better sense prevailed, and we decided to turn around. So now we're back to that little stream out of Irene that we can paddle all the way to Irene, and then head south towards the Irene portage, and then we'll see from there what we do. I'm not even looking at the time because I know it's much later than I normally travel, but we had a good lunch. I think we have enough energy. Depending on how things go, we may stay on Irene, we may cross the Irene portage, we may stay on an island site in Sanford that I know that's a very nice site, or we might actually get to Tip Top Lodge. So lots of options, but at least from here on we should be going to places that have defined portages and that I know on the map where we're going. So about a mile away from Tip Top Lodge. We have reservations for 2. Don't want to be late. I told JJ I'm not looking at the clock because I really don't want to know what time it is, but the sun's going down and it's like practically 1st of June in northern Canada, so I can guess what time it is. We started this morning at 8:30. We'll check the GIPs and see mileage, but it might be a record day of hours and miles for me. We'll see. But cool sunset. And even though we had several little rain showers today, tonight looks like it's going to be fantastic. We had a very nice night at Tip Top Lodge. It's kind of a shambles. People have kind of trashed it out for sure. But this is their main lodge. I did a previous video where I spent a lot of time touring different houses and stuff, but it's always fascinating. A little piece of history. This has been vacant for, I guess, 15 years, 17 years, something like that. But really, it's just like the apocalypse happened. Everything's still kind of sitting out like it was. And it's like, time to go, let's get out of here. We're leaving now. And I just don't understand all this usable equipment just being left behind. There's fishing boats on the shore, there's a 4-wheeler in the shed, some boat motors, not to mention all the cabins. This is always fun to see. Got a variety of liquors sitting on the counter. I don't know. Could be from people coming up here and leaving things behind. Probably not 20 years old, but at any rate, that's Tip Top Main Lodge. And this is our day to begin. I think this is Wednesday. And the most glorious day. Again, Sanford Lake, just like glass. First time in my experience. All these cabins are slowly sinking into the earth. So we got in here last night about 9:30 after about 13 hours of travel yesterday, including the getting not lost, but not being able to find a portage in from the north side, kind of retracing our steps all the way down Irene to the Irene portage and then heading north again. I think it's probably 27 miles for that day. That's the longest day I've done, miles and hours wise. So we slept in this morning. I got up about 8 o'clock and we've just been lounging, doing some cleanup. Had a nice potato pancake breakfast and probably get on the water about 11 o'clock today. Super late for me, but we're not in any rush. We only have about, on the plan, probably 10 miles to go, just heading straight south. And since the weather was so nice and the water so calm, I didn't feel any rush to leave. But we're packed up now, ready to go. In the middle of Sanford Lake. Not a single ripple on the water except for the one made by the canoe. Very unusual. We popped into this island campsite at the south end of Sanford Lake to take a rest from a long paddle. And it's amazing how crystal clear the water is here. It's a fantastic campsite, if you can find the entrance, which is kind of obscure. It's got a few widowmakers up there. Snagged him. Just snagged him.
You want to grab him?
Yep.
Oh, very long.
Oh, pickerel. Just on the south side of Sanford Lake. Whoa, nice one.
Yeah.
So we made it to camp today on Wasp Lake about 6 p.m. Started traveling late. It was about 11 in the morning when we started after a late breakfast. JJ's over here catching fish for dinner. Just from the shore. So it was a long day of paddling down Sanford Lake. We stopped and explored the campsite that I videoed earlier, and then continue on towards the Wasp Lake portage. The north side of Wasp Lake portage is easy peasy until you come up to the road, and then depending on which way you've taken to get to the road, you either walk through a snowmobile trail, and that's at this time, and like it was the last time I went through, like knee deep in muck and mud and water. It was horrible, and JJ and I ended up taking that trail. We dragged the canoe through in one pack, and then went back and tried to discover what the real portage was, because we knew that wasn't it. And we found it. So just a reminder to yourself, next time you take the Wasp Lake portage, the northern half of that on the Sanford Lake side, you have to find the correct portage. Don't be suckered in and take no, I'm sorry, it's the southern half that's the snowmobile trail. So the southern half is the mucky one. Yeah. So the previous time that I got caught in the same thing, I was actually coming from the south and got suckered into taking what looked like the straight portage trail. And in fact, the correct portage trail was like a right angle to that then ended up on dry land. And doing it in reverse today, I ended up doing the exact same thing I did a couple of years ago, getting into that horrible muck. I mean, it was exhausting. Without JJ doing most of the work pulling the canoe, it would have been virtually impossible. But anyway, we got through that and did some fishing on Wasp Lake, caught several, JJ did, caught several bass and one pickerel, and now on Wasp Lake, one northern pike. So a really good day. Some challenges, but at the same time, perfect weather, almost windless weather, and beautiful sunshine, almost hot. I mean, I don't have any short sleeve shirts, and I'm a little bit warm, but beats being cold and rainy. So we'll get ready, get some dinner pretty soon, and probably have a late night, maybe some star watching. Just finished the first portage. Took the easy this time snowmobile track south of Wasp Lake, and the wind has substantially picked up today. Yesterday the water was glass. Thankfully on Sanford Lake, which is a huge lake, would be probably pretty treacherous today. These are small lakes, and even that is making some pretty good waves. Just finished the second portage on Gamble River, south of Wasp Lake. Again, a snowmobile track and a very nice open portage. Easy walk through the woods. And looking south now towards Gamble Lake, there's a nice little, I think, a fishing camp over there on the left. Passed that once before and talked to gentlemen that live there in the summertime at least. It's a beautiful spot. The wind is still substantial on these small lakes. It's not that much of an issue. It's hard paddling against it, but man, if you were on a big lake like Clearwater or Sanford, it would be, you might be windbound. I don't know. This is the view looking north as we cross the power lines. Nice view into Gamble River. And we're following snowmobile tracks as we go south. There is a more rugged, which might be the actual portage trail, a little further up that way, but having been here before, I knew about this track, so we took the easier way. This is quite a view. So we're continuing to paddle south, and it's quite a windy day. Get to times like this, we're a little bit protected. It's not too bad, but definitely white caps on, again, a small lake. So I took a little break to do the video, and now I need to start paddling again. For the next portage, we just come down from that way. Not enough water to float the boat because of this huge beaver dam. Murky water on the north side. So this starts at a beaver dam at that end, ends in a ugly swamp with a bunch of dead trees, muck and mud everywhere. You can kind of paddle through a little bit, and then you get to this creek, which with the bags out you can kind of float the canoe through most of it. So we've got the bags going back for the canoe. So down there is the north end of this portage where we started, and it just is eerie and spooky to me. That brackish water and all the dead trees, it just looks like you shouldn't be coming through here. But we dragged over that beaver dam and then paddled some of that water, had to drag over another place, paddled some of this up to here, and then once we got to the creek, it actually gets a lot nicer. You can actually walk the creek, solid ground or very slippery rocks, one of the two. And then once you turn the corner, then it's maybe 30 yards or so to the other beaver dam. So once you know your way here, it's not that bad. But the first time I came through here, I was a little freaked out. It was my second to last day of the trip, and I couldn't find the portage. And I knew there had to be a portage, and I couldn't find it. And finally I just did what we just did. But it took me like an hour to decide that's what I had to do. This time around, it took no time. Getting through was probably 15 minutes altogether. So knowing that, it's a much easier portage, but still kind of spooky. So immediately after that last portage, that just goes into a little pond and another creek. It's a short carry to another beaver dam before we continue down to, I guess, whatever the next main lake is, Crow Rock, perhaps. The final portage into Dashwa Lake. We're at the north tip of Dashwa. Wind is still blowing pretty hard. We've been on small lakes, so it hadn't been too bad, but definitely paddling into the wind the whole time. We'll see what it looks like on Dashwa, which is a bigger lake. We'll be at the north end, so might see the biggest waves coming at us. We'll see. But now it's just a job to find a campsite, have some lunch, and relax until tomorrow morning. Except for the wind, it's a fantastic day. The wind does keep the bugs away for the most part. That's a good thing. So it's about 6:30. We did make it to our campsite on Dashwa Lake. Like the last time I videoed, we just done some of the more well-defined portages getting into Dashwa. And the wind had been pretty hounding all day, and I was really concerned once we got to Dashwa, a much bigger lake, if that was going to be an issue. So we got around the first corner into open water, and it was pretty strong wind, pretty good waves, and a few whitecaps, but felt like we could paddle it safely, and the canoe did fine. We were kind of island hopping, but we tried to island hop, but as soon as we would head to an island, instead of the wind coming from the direction it was, now it was coming from the side adjacent to the island, so it was still in our face or almost broadside. But strong paddling, good motors, we were able to get through. And now, of course, does what it normally does. So it's 6:30 and there's just a nice, delicate, wispy wind. So I told JJ, you know, if anyone is uncomfortable about paddling, we stop and pull off to the shore somewhere and wait it out, because more likely by 4 or 5 o'clock, probably the wind's going to die down. So that's pretty much what happened with the wind today. But like I said, the boat was very stable. We never took on any water. We felt in control at all times. So I'm happy that we got here. It was still 4:30 by the time we got here, so it's still kind of a long day. And we didn't start till 10 o'clock because we just kind of took it easy and camped in the morning. But dinner's cooking right now. We're making final preparations, head out in the morning. We did each take a nice little camp shower, spit bath / shower. So prepare ourselves to look halfway decent by the time we get to the driver tomorrow and not stink too much. So we'll probably try to leave here about 7 a.m. It's only about a 3-mile paddle, but that'll give us time to make sure we're there. The driver comes at 9. So it's been a fantastic trip. Hard, very arduous. The portages, especially the first 4 days, were challenging, to say the least. Hard to find and challenging. Today's portages were a lot of beaver dam carryovers, some little creeks, and then some well-defined portages. But definitely felt like we deserved our dinner at the end of the day. We saw 2 moose, lots of beaver, too many eagles even to count, and 1 grouse on the trail today, so that was kind of fun. So, should be it for the trip. JJ's fishing again. We've caught a decent number of fish, and we've only eaten 1 bass, because most of the fish we caught were mid-morning. But decent fish. Jay just got several bass and several walleye and one pike. So he's, I think, pretty happy with that part of the trip. He's fishing now, so trying to get one more that we can cook up for tonight, but probably not. We'll see what the weather does. It's looking a little iffy, so I pretty much tidied up camp in preparation in case it rains tonight, to make it easy to, well, to keep everything dry and to make it easy to get out in the morning. So, fantastic trip, fantastic weather. I can't complain about the weather. We only had one day so far with actual rain, and to be honest, we probably only needed rain gear maybe 30 or 45 minutes during that day. I think we kept it on regardless because it was good for the insulation and good for keeping the bugs from biting. Bugs haven't been too bad, but the black flies have been a little bit of a nuisance. I've got a ring of bites on my hat line and my beard line. Mosquitoes really have not been much of a problem. Today and yesterday we've experienced quite a few ticks, so that was something else to look out for. Alright, getting ready to wrap this up, pick up tomorrow and head to Duluth and fly out Minneapolis the next day. We just finished up the trip, got to the Dashua Lake pickup spot about 7:45, so it took practically just a little over 30 minutes to get there. Must be a little closer than I thought. There's a calm lake coming over. We have to wait about an hour and a half for the driver because it's scheduled 9 o'clock. We got there about 9:15. Fantastic trip. The weather was awesome. Wind yesterday, rain a couple of times on one day, but otherwise mostly days like this. Really cannot complain about that. Bugs were a little bit of trouble, not too bad. Mosquitoes, black flies were even worse, and then still lots and lots of ticks. But definitely a really good trip, a fun trip, different than others that I've done, and that it's really going into lakes with no documentation about portages or anything. Thankfully, Jim Clark, in his retirement, came in and marked up portages that he remembered, and they were accurate. It was fantastic. So, yeah, time to hit the showers and head to Duluth.